This week is Pesach, the Jewish celebration of Passover, and the Christian Holy Week that begins with Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem and ends with his humiliation, torture, and death. It is an emotionally laden week for any of us who have been part of either or both of these traditions, and there is a lot to unpack. I am not here to argue the historicity of either the exodus of the Hebrew people from Egypt or the events surrounding the death of Jesus. When I did a bit of searching, both the Exodus and the events of Holy Week are ambiguous. Texts supporting the events offer circular reasoning. It's true, because it says here that it's true. It is up to you to follow where your faith leads you. And remember that things don't need to be factual to be true. What I want to bring into this space is a bit of commentary, perhaps holding up the sacred mirror to the Passover account and discovering wisdom for our own time. For those whose biblical scholarship might be a bit rusty, let's do a quick recount. God chooses Moses to free the Hebrew people from slavery in Egypt. Pharaoh's a bit of a jerk. He says, yeah, sure, and then he goes back on his word. That rings a bell. I don't know. God sends a series of plagues to try to change Pharaoh's mind. 9 times, Pharaoh says, okay, and then goes back on his word. So 9 times, God sends plagues to try to get Pharaoh's attention, to get him to play nice. But the plagues affect everyone, not just the royal family. Everybody suffers. Pharaoh begs for the plagues to stop. They do. And then the scripture says that God hardens Pharaoh's heart. Wait, what? If you've read the book of Job in the Bible, you might be feeling a sense of deja vu. A sermon for another day. Anyway, back to Exodus. God sends plagues, everybody suffers, Pharaoh makes pie crust promises, easily made, easily broken, and then God hardens Pharaoh's heart. Rinse, repeat. 9 times. Then comes the big finale. The 10th plague is not actually a plague, it's premeditated mass murder. The firstborn of every family, not just Pharaoh's, is visited by the angel of death. Only those who have smeared blood on the thresholds of their dwellings are spared. And the only ones who received that heads up to do so are God's favorites. So that is the story of Pesach, probably in a version you've never heard, where the angel of death passed over the homes where blood had been spilled, so those families were spared. So this, I have to tell you, this is not where I come up with a big reveal, a thoroughly thought out and articulate reason for all of the bloodshed, or even why it is a celebration when so many suffered and died because of one man's God-induced refusal to do the right thing. Also familiar. Okay. And let's remember that Pharaoh, in that time, was considered a god, right? But that is definitely a sermon for another time. So if I extrapolate all of this to the current situation in our country, all I can come up with is a powerful man who says one thing, does another, no compassion or mercy for the everybody that is affected. And given all of that, I really hope that nothing bad happens to the Pharaoh and his family. And especially not to the masses of all of us and to this precious earth. In the story, it took 9 hideous plagues that affected everybody, plus the premeditated mass murder of countless firstborns, which, by the way, is not just babies, right? How many of you are firstborn children? Yeah, bye. All of that to change one man's mind. May goodness somehow prevail on earth. So why do I tell you all of this? Partly because it is Pesach, and I thought it would be timely to connect some dots. Dots that we may not have even known were there, but they're in a book. Many of us have used the language of living in unprecedented times, but that is not completely accurate. Whether in myth or in international headlines, humanity has trod this path before. The fact is that the path is well worn from the footsteps, weary footsteps of those who have been oppressed and the footsteps of the oppressor. Okay, have a nice week. Bye. You know I wouldn't leave you there, right? Those of you who know, you can trust me, I won't leave you in that space. And I will not ruin your Easter festivities next week with more of my biblical ponderings. So let's switch gears and ponder change, which actually was all part of that, but in a sneaky way. I feel like I should begin with an apology. I chose the monthly themes for this church year nearly a year ago. And at that time, I thought, change, perfect. I adore change. I still adore change, but here we are. Here we are. So much change. And I fear we are weary with all of that change and the threat of change. It can be tempting in the midst of uncontrollable change to want to dig in, hunker down, and wait it out. I feel it too. And yet, even if we resist change, we can emerge from this time changed. I prefer to have at least some of the change to be on my own terms, growing my soul, rather than wrapping it up in shrink wrap and waiting for it all to pass. So we just sang together, "Lift me up to the light of change." And one of the stanzas in the song even acknowledges that change can burn our eyes. I am grateful that I am a person who generally appreciates change. It helps in these days. And I recognize that some of you are truly suffering with all of the changes and related uncertainty. I don't have a magic wand to eliminate that anxiety, but I do believe that as a gathered community, we have a way to soften the impact and keep our focus aligned with our values. There's hurting in my family, there is sorrow in my town, there's a panic all across the nation, and there is wailing the whole world round. I don't think we need to rehearse the many forms of hurt, sorrow, and panic and wailing that we are experiencing. We could certainly add to that list shock, dismay, despair, but our purpose today is not to recite all of the ways our hearts are feeling constricted, but how we can live into our values and share them with the world, offering a word of hope, holding on to a moment of grace and compassion. Yesterday, as I was writing today's sermon, Les went out to deal with a tree that had fallen and wedged itself into a tree in our backyard. I don't know how it did it. There was this V-shaped space, this big old tree across a drainage ditch, and it went in like it belonged there. It does not belong there. So I saw him go out there to deal with it, and not long after, I saw our next door neighbor walking across our yard to help. Chainsaw in hand, ear protection, just kitty corner, right to help. And that was a moment of grace. That is one way that we can heal the hurt and the harm happening in our world. Thank you. I think it's so important to realize that it is these I was going to say small acts, but as you can hear from these folks, these are not small acts. These are tender, doable acts. So we don't have to bring down the patriarchy in order to make everything work. I mean, we should do that. But in the meantime, a gentle word, a pan of lasagna, I mean, they are transformative. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for all that you are willing to receive. You know, there's a little ditty in our hymnal, and I say this all the time, that we sing at my house as our table grace. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. That is an ultimate truth, right? That why is that not in that big old book with a lot of words in it? Well, maybe it is. I need to read harder. In her blog site, Mary Popova writes, "To begin anything, a new practice, a new project, a new love, is to cast upon yourself a spell against stagnation." I give you permission to cast a spell against stagnation. What a wonderful phrase. So you can begin a practice of compassion, a new project of living into the values and principles of our faith in new and creative ways. All of this acts as a spell against your own stagnation, because we are all in this together. We are ship's companions on this beautiful, fragile, and finite boat that we call Earth, which leads us to another